And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. I say welcome back because I know you were just listening to some of our stuff and you loved it so much that you came back for more. And guess what? We have more for you. This is the podcast. It's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And yes, you guessed it. Our guests today are podcasters. And yes, we have two of them. That's right. It's a 2-for-1 deal today. So stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. I have had a chance to meet this gentleman before. This is my first time meeting his lovely wife. I have a feeling that she's in charge of this interview, so we'll probably have to talk to her a little bit more. But just from the look of her, she said go blue right out of the gate. All right. So I know that she understands Michigan and how that works. We're already vibing. Yes, I have an IU cup, but that's for another podcast on another day. As we move forward, folks, this is the place where we all come together. This is the place where the Podcaster Nation lifts up other podcasters and puts your message out to the world. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. And that's why we're here. Now, if you're not a member of our private group, the Podcaster Nation on Facebook, why not? If you have a podcast, join. That's the only thing you have to have is a podcast. It's not a big, long list of requirements. You don't have to pass a test. You just have to have a podcast. Jump in, join our group, and network with all of our other podcaster members in there. You will love it. It's awesome. Plus, it's a great way to get you on the show. And that's the last thing I'm going to say is that if you're a podcaster and you haven't been on my show yet, again, why not? Message me. Let's get you on here. All right, beautiful. So, my guest today, please welcome the hosts of Couples Therapy in 7 Words, uh, Dr. Bruce Chalmer and Judy Chalmer, co-hosts.
Uh,
Thank you, folks.
Alexander.
Try that again.
I'm
Judy.
sorry,
Alexander.
Judy Alexander.
Yeah, my ex's name is Judy Chalmer.
Oh
It's really
my
fascinating that way.
goodness. Okay, folks, we're going to start the whole podcast over. I'm sorry, but I had no idea. I blame Bruce, but we're just going to go from there.
I put her name right on there.
That's
That's
right.
Judy, what's your last name? Alexander? All right.
Alexander.
yeah.
Folks, let me
That's
start that again.
great.
Please welcome my co-hosts, Dr. Bruce Chalmer and his lovely wife with her own name, Judy Alexander. Thank you, folks, for being on the show. All right, now that I've completely messed everything up,
That's
th-
okay.
this is why we don't edit.
Lots of people make that same mistake. And like
Th-
he
th-
said, his ex-wife is named Judy Chalmer, so we get each other's mail.
wow. I didn't catch that
We
first
were
time.
all at the same service last night, as a matter of
That's
fact.
right, we were.
Yes, we sometimes end up in the same place. So I've had occasion to say to people, "This is Judy Alexander, to whom I married, and this is Judy Chalmer, to whom I used to be married." It's
I'm not sure I want to be sitting in that row
yeah,
of seats, but
but we get
okay.
along. It's fine.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
So then, let's see. Bruce, you are a psychologist.
I am indeed.
Okay. Folks, tell me a little bit about who you both are, what you both do, and what brought you to, starting a podcast on this topic.
Sure. Want to
Well,
go
oh,
for that?
sure, I'll start. Okay, so I retired from the education field about three years ago, 4 years ago. I think it's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I was working my last 23 years of my career as the education director at a local temple, Temple Sinai. Go South Burlington, Temple Sinai, wonderful temple. Um, Before that, I was a teacher and various, like, I don't know, third grade science teacher, did lots of different teaching. Before that, I was an advertising copywriter. So I've had a few different careers. And since I retired, I wrote a book and I'm still staying active in my synagogue and doing lots of stuff. I train adults and children for bar and bat mitzvah. So I'm very busy.
That's awesome. Let me follow up real quick before we get to Bruce, because I've
hmm
talked to him a little bit.
hmm
What's your book about, and what's the name of it?
Well, that is such a good question. And it is called The Blue Tent Erotic Tales from the Bible. And it's under my pseudonym, Laria Zilber. And it's exactly what it says. It's 10 short stories based on biblical tales and characters, filling it in with sexual details.
Wow.
Very
Okay.
explicit erotica.
Yeah, which interestingly enough, it was, I think, doing our podcast that brought me to writing this because we've spoken with a lot of people over the years. I guess we've been doing this almost 5 years, and we've spoken with a lot of sex experts. We've spoken with marriage counselors, all kinds of people that deal with couples. And as you can imagine, one of the big problems people have in coupledom is sex. So they're always looking for ways to spice up their sex lives. And so I thought that, well, with my knowledge of, Bible and my knowledge of working with people in the sex field, that I would combine those two talents and passions and put it all into one book, and I did. So,
Wow. I mean, honestly, when you run a podcast, you never have any idea where things are going to go.
Isn't
yeah,
that something? Yeah,
Ever.
never
like
knows.
yeah, to look at me, nobody would say, "Oh, my, she writes, erotic, literature."
Well, I'm not sure what that means. What are you supposed to look like if you're
No,
doing it
and
right?
look, like this is a retired principal.
It's the quiet ones you have to watch out for. It really is.
Exactly,
So,
exactly. Yeah, so
huh.
that's what I now do, write erotic literature.
Okay. If you will send me a link to that book, I'll make sure it hits the show notes and we'll
I
put it
sure
out there
will.
for everybody. That's awesome. All right. I don't know how you follow that, Bruce. I really
I
don't.
don't either. I mean, well, you can perhaps you can see why I'm just so delighted to be married to this particular person. What can I tell you?
Explains a lot
For
about,
so many reasons. Um, but maybe I'll well, so I'm a psychologist, as you mentioned. I've been doing that for over 30 years now. And the last chunk of that, the last half of it anyway, been more and more focused on couples. I did a lot of individual therapy, but I mostly focused on couples because I just love doing that. Prior to that, I was a statistician. I taught courses in data communications as I was developing my practice. I've had sort of a bit of a checkered career as well. Um, and uh, so among the things I was doing as I've developed my practice over the years, I started doing videos because it was fun. I just enjoy it. I started doing, in fact, the very first video I think it was called Couples Therapy in 7 Words because I had developed this 7 word thing. Maybe we'll talk about that a little later, but I had developed a 7 word formula that seemed to guide my work and it was kind of a neat concept. And so I did a video called Couples Therapy in 7 Words, explained the 7 words. Yes, Judy happens to be holding our merch. I guess a lot of people are hearing this, not seeing it. We just happen to have some merch that has the 7 words on it. Judy, tell folks what the 7 words are.
Be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
Yes, those are the 7 words. You have to count and to get 7 words because seven's better than six. It's like I
Okay.
could have said 6 words and leave out the and, but no, it's got to be seven. So yeah, we're Jewish. Seven's a good number. So yeah, it's a thing.
Okay. All right. I'll take your
So
word for it.
be kind, don't panic, and have faith. So anyway, I did a video about that and did a whole bunch of videos on a whole bunch of topics, had a lot of fun doing it. Finally, about what, 6, 7 years ago, I decided, you know what? I think there's a book in this. I had a bunch of videos. I think there's a book here. So I wrote a book oriented around those 7 words and lots of the topics that I had done videos on. I got a lot of the text of the book from the videos that I had done, and I turned it into a book and found a publisher. And lo and behold, the publication date just happened to be February 29th, that leap day, February 29th, 2020. What an auspicious time to release a book.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just in time for everything to shut down
Right.
because of the
Right.
Great
pandemic.
timing.
Great timing. So I'm thinking, well, what are we going to do? And everybody's sort of scrambling at that point. What do you do if you have a new book there? You want to launch it. So we decided we would do, or I decided, and then asked Judy about it, decided to do a Facebook Live launch of the book. So asked Judy to participate because she's just great. She's great on camera. She's got a voice that I frankly fell in love with. So, all of those things. She's really good at that stuff. And we had fun together. So we did this Facebook Live presentation.
Plus, when he's by himself, he can just go on and on
Oh
and on.
God.
So he needs somebody to, you
Yeah.
know.
She's good. She's good with the hook. She's very nice about it too. It's really good.
Gotcha.
And
All
I
right.
and Lord knows I need it. So anyway, so we did this Facebook Live, and people were saying, "Oh, you guys were great together. Maybe you should do a podcast." And then right around the same time, I was interviewed on Shayla Shapiro's podcast,
Right.
which
Right,
she
the book.
stopped doing, but she had this very popular podcast called Write the Book, where she interviewed authors, and she interviewed me, and she said afterward, "Hey, you do a great interview. You should do a podcast." So
A
talk to Judy and
podcast
say,
was born.
let's do a podcast. And as you and your viewers and listeners know, the barrier to entry is pretty low. You know,
Yes,
it ain't
absolutely.
hard to do.
Thank
And you don't
goodness.
have to.
Yes.
Yes, and I love that. You know, you don't have to invest in a lot of equipment, and we just had fun. So we launched the podcast in, what was it, June or
I
something
think
like
so.
that?
Yeah.
Just about 5 years ago. We're recording this in 2025, in April of 2025. And so it's coming up on 5 years. We launched it and we just kept doing it. It kept being fun. So,
Yeah. First, we kept asking like everybody we knew to be on it,
yeah,
all our friends, and then slowly we started getting like more people,
yeah,
like real people
Sure.
that weren't just our friends, and we hooked up with Podmatch, I
yeah.
think.
Podmatch, which is, I want to put in, that's how we found each other, I
Right.
think, through
Absolutely.
Podmatch.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fabulous tool. You know, it's not perfect, but nothing's perfect, but it's a fabulous tool. Really, we've gotten zillions of guests through that. We've also gotten guests since we've been out there for a while.
Yeah,
People now pitch, you know,
they
not through
contact
podcasts.
us.
They contact us and they give a pitch. Often
Right.
it's a publicist or something like that.
Mhm.
Anybody who's written a book wants to be on a podcast, speaking as one who's written books, or you too.
Right. And so, we'll be reading Psychology Today or other magazines,
Mhm.
or I've read articles in the New York Times, and we'll say, boy, that would be make a great guest, and just email them and they say, sure, I'll be on your show.
Yeah,
So it's, people are, want to talk about what they have. So,
Right.
and we're happy to talk with them about it. And we've had fabulous guests over the last 5 years on our show.
yeah. I
We're
counted
very,
up recently,
Mhm.
just as I was writing kind of a little retrospective post on a blog or something, and it was right around the time we just passed our 200th episode, and I counted up. I think that we had like 106 guests in those two, because we do some of them just ourselves,
Right.
but I think we've had about 106 guests,
Mhm.
and 105 of them have been fabulous. I'm not going to say anything about the other one.
Okay, all the listeners need to know I've never been on their show. Okay, so
That's
this
true.
isn't a dig at
But
me,
you
just
would
so
have
you
been
know.
fabulous.
You would have been
Maybe we
fabulous.
should have you on, actually. But that
Anytime.
maybe we should have you on. Actually, that's we'll talk.
We'll
We'll
Okay,
talk.
have our
we'll
people talk
talk.
to your people, right?
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
But and it's funny that though, and you'd never. I think I'm convinced the one exception to that you would never know from hearing the show. It was the only time after doing an interview where we finished up and turned to each other and said that was kind of painful. It just the person just wasn't engaging with us.
Right.
But everybody else was, and I say they were all fabulous. They vary. It depends on how interested you are in the topic.
Sure.
But we've just enjoyed having folks on, and I think the fact that we enjoy it is what makes us. I think we're good interviewers because of that.
Hmm.
We
Because
like to
we're
engage.
interested in them. Like I said, I never would have written that book if I hadn't spoken to all the people I spoke with, because I've learned so much.
I love that. First of all, I mean, you unpacked a lot. So,
Hmm.
starting with friends and family and things like that is how a lot of people get started. So,
Hmm.
totally cool. But you guys have had a lot of guests on in
Yeah.
your episodes. So, I mean,
Mhm.
kudos to you for that, for sure. Because a lot of people are just scared to death to do interviews and have somebody else come on because they don't know what to do and so on. Were you just natural interviewers when you got going? Or, I mean, what kind of thought did you put into it? What kind of preparation was it? Like, hey, we're going to interview somebody.
Oh
So,
yeah.
how'd you go about getting ready for your first interview?
I think I don't recall
I don't even
specific
remember
prep.
who
Do
our
you?
no, not specific. Well, Bruce is used to talking to people because he's a psychologist, so he's got that background of talking to couples.
And you do
And
too.
I've got,
Yeah.
I've been a teacher and educator for so long,
Right.
you got to deal with everybody. So I'm used to talking to people.
Well, and you ran an administrator. You ran the school at
Right,
the
right, right, right.
synagogue too. So
So,
yeah, we're both used to talking with folks and engaging with folks, and we're doing it about stuff we're really interested in. And if you're genuinely interested, it just comes through. If you're not scared, if you're not, how do we put it? If you're not too scared, I'm trying to remember. Early on, I must have had some nerves. I don't remember. It must have been a little like, "Ooh, how's this going to go?"
yeah.
What I think one of the early ones we did was with Carl Pilmer, is a great guy. By the he was one of the good ones. By the way, he was one of the almost all. It's
All right.
Fantastic.
fantastic.
Gotcha.
He's a sociologist at Cornell. He's one. I think I remember a little bit of nerves before that because he's big. Like we read about him in the New York Times. he'd written this, this really popular book in the New York Times, and thinking, oh, our little podcast, we're going to get this famous guy on. And of course,
The
he was,
50-watt station, and
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. He was great. Of course he
he
was.
was
And
wonderful,
and
and
so
just
we,
couldn't have
yeah,
been kinder and nicer.
yeah,
And here he's like talking to these two little schlumps in Vermont. It's not it's not like we're, Esther Perel or something like that
yeah,
that has a
yeah,
huge following, or Oprah. But he was just wonderful, and we had a great conversation with him. And his whole background is in family rifts,
yeah, estrangement, right? Yeah,
estrangement.
yeah,
And boy, that was a wonderful interview.
yeah.
And
Wow, I
So
bet it was.
and since then, and I don't have names off the top of my head, but since then, we've interviewed lots of folks who are pretty well known in the grand scheme of things. Way more well known than we are, so far. We're working on it. But and that just the more you do it, the more you realize that these are just people, and they're on our show, our little show, because they've written books or they've got a thing they want to publicize, and we're happy to do it. And so,
And people, they'll send us their, and we try to read the books in advance. Bruce is probably better at it than I am. And, at least I'll skim through it and go through it. So we try to read the books in advance, but, you
yeah,
don't always have the time. So I try to get a sense of what it is that they're talking about, writing about. You can tell from the bios, or they sometimes send you questions you should ask. Um,
there's a tip, by the way, if you can take the time. Because I've always read at least parts, substantial parts of their books. Many times I've read the whole book,
Mhm.
and when I've liked it, especially the
Yeah,
ones I've liked, but
right.
because there's some really good ones,
there's some really good.
and the several people afterward have said, "Wow, it's great to be interviewed by somebody who actually read the book."
Right.
Because so often they're getting
Right.
questions. It's like, obviously you haven't read this thing, have you? And they don't usually. I mean, I've been interviewed, as you know, on podcasts where they haven't read the book. I don't expect people to have read all my books or even read the books they're asking about. I don't resent that in any way, but when they have, it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, I
oh
It makes
understand.
for a better
it makes for a better
conversation.
conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. So do you guys split up the reading between you, or do you just take turns? Or do you both read
Yeah.
it? I mean, you're
We
a
both
couple of
we both
overachievers
read it.
here.
We
So
we
Yeah,
we both have it
yeah.
on our, we both get the digital copy, and as much time as we each have, we each read it. So no, we don't coordinate that stuff. I don't think
Mm-mm.
we particularly
No, you
coordinate
send
any.
it to me, and then I try to read it, and
Yeah, yeah.
you read it.
And same thing with, questions we'll ask. I always prepare, as indeed you have, obviously, right? I prepare in advance. Um, and I have a few questions lined up just to make sure that they're there in the conversation that are relevant to whatever the person is bringing.
mhm.
And so I prepare that. General, I think I
Yeah,
almost
you
always do that.
usually
Yeah,
prepare that, but we like to think of it more as a conversation and see where it flows. So if it gets
Yeah.
away from the questions, that's fine too. But there are certain things that we do want to hit and make sure that we get in the interview. So
usually because that's, if somebody's publicizing a particular thing, that's what they want us to ask about, and we're happy to do that. And
Right.
there's another thing, I suppose, again, for all those podcasters out there, I don't think this will come as a surprise to anyone. I hope not. We want to make our guests look good. We're not out to get them,
Right.
And I
There you
wouldn't want
go.
to be a guy, and I appreciate that when you interviewed me. It's like you clearly were all about engaging with me. I really enjoyed my interview with you, Rory, by the way, just
Thank
to
you. I
put a
appreciate that.
plug for that. It is really about making a guest look good because that's it. That's a much more engaging podcast. It's not a gotcha.
right, and you want to
Um,
Right.
make them feel comfortable, because the
yeah,
more comfortable they feel, the more they're going to open up.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. All my stuff is conversational. So, I mean, I'm hearing everything you're saying loud and clear. You guys are just adorable, and you're absolutely killing me, to be completely honest. So it's really hard to not just be sitting here smiling at both of you this whole time. But yeah, I love that. Again, my dog's barking, so please pardon the reality of my podcasts and the
Can't hear it
Can't
on
authenticity.
hear
Zoom.
it.
Zoom
Oh,
filters that out really well.
good. I'm really
Yeah.
glad to hear that. Okay.
Yes.
So, well, I guess I gave myself up then. Nobody had to know that. All
Yeah.
right. But
Oh,
I
just the
love,
other day I was being interviewed and my phone rang and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And then I saw the tape of it. And it's like,
uh-huh.
"Oh, you couldn't hear the phone. I needn't have bothered." But anyway, yeah, Zoom's really clever about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the phone I got covered. I missed your
Mm.
last name, but I got the phone covered. So I guess
There
I'm
you go.
halfway there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so you were natural interviewers. That's awesome. Love to hear that. Um, and I know Podmatch is a big, tool and things. You've talked about that, but do all of your guests that come on have a topic that relates to some sort of couples therapy, or do you branch out from that in some way? I'm just curious because I've listened to a lot of them, but of course I haven't listened to all of them.
Yeah.
It's mostly has to do with relationships and couples. Or if it doesn't, because recently we had one on that really wasn't a couples thing, but we tried to get it, we were able to relate it to that
Just
was
like at Wilk. Yeah,
Wilkinson.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You want to tell them a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
about Wilk?
So yeah, it's so the general, it's not always couples therapy per se. It's kind of everything about relationships, anything, and of course that can cover a very, very large amount of territory.
Hmm.
We had Wilk Wilkinson on, and I put in the notes for that one. I don't like to compare our guests because it's like comparing your children. It's like no, they're all wonderful, except for that one. Never mind that one, which we're never going to tell. But but this one I said is probably one of our most important ones. And the reason is he is an interesting guy. He is Wilk Wilkinson, just putting in a plug for him. He's a Christian nationalist. Now, those of us who know us, he's not a Christian nationalist. Boy, that's
No,
completely
he's a
wrong. He's a
conservative.
Christian conservative. Boy, that was a talk about blowing it
Whoops.
there. I completely misstated that. He is
Okay.
a Christian conservative. Now, we are neither Christian nor politically conservative. So that's already interesting. We kind of come out of a very different world. The
But we
neat
weren't
thing
there to challenge him. That
Oh no,
wasn't, that
not
wasn't,
on
that
the
wasn't.
contrary. The neat thing about Wilk is he is a member of an organization called Braver Angels, which I have since joined actually, which is all about facilitating conversation across the political divide. And the thing that was really amazing, one of the amazing things about Wilk is he has a podcast. He is a podcaster, very popular podcast. Most of his audience traditionally has been folks from the political right. That's where he comes from, the sort of the Christian right. And he was very critical during the pandemic, very critical about how the government was handling the pandemic, and in particular, specifically critical about the NIH and its director, Dr. Francis Collins.
Mhm.
And Dr. Collins reached out to Wilk because he said, I don't understand why people are so upset about this. I think I have some blind spots. And Wilk reached back, and they got together, and they have since become really good friends, even though they still differ a lot about their political perspectives, but they've become really good friends. And I wrote in one of my books, I had a whole couple of chapters about ideas versus ideologies, where if you can share ideas even when they're in conflict, it's generative. It it opens you up. But when it hardens into ideology so that, well, I can't listen to you, you're on the other side, then it shuts people down. And Wilk and Dr. Collins now are going around doing something of a dog and pony show, I guess, where they're showing how it's possible to be friends across this divide. And I find that incredibly inspiring, especially in the times we live in now. So we had Wilk on, and I was on his podcast, and how that relates to couples therapy. And I point this out again because I had written about this several years ago. This relates to couples therapy because so often the challenges for a couple are very similar to challenges across the political spectrum, even if the couple isn't dealing with political differences. Oh, I'll tell you, I've seen that,
Mhm.
and it's really difficult when they are kind of divided these days, especially.
Right.
But even if they're not, they're often divided by what I would call ideology. They have these ideas about each other that have hardened so that anything they see that seems to say, oh, there you go again, being whatever it is that I'm upset about, and they just shut down at that point. And the more you can have conversations that here's my favorite phrase, tolerate the anxiety. We once said if there's a drinking game where every time I say tolerate the anxiety, somebody took a shot, they'd be plastered by the end of our podcast. So, because I say that a lot. But if they can tolerate the anxiety of intimacy, of actually hearing someone be honest, even if they're disagreeing, without freaking out, without shutting down, that's how couples heal. That's how our country can heal. So having someone like Wilk was, he's not in the couples therapy
Right.
world at all, but it was really, I thought it was
I think
really,
he was one of the few that we've had on that was not in the couples realm, but we were able to take that topic of his, like Bruce said, and talk about ideas versus ideology and how you can talk to people that don't share the same opinions you do, or sometimes even the same beliefs that you do, but how do you make it work?
Nice. So you still found a way to kind of connect it back to your
Yeah. Oh,
topic.
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
And that one doesn't, at least to me, didn't feel like much of a stretch, you know.
No, no. Plus, he
Sure.
was such an interesting guy, and
Yeah.
yeah, I thought what he had to say was very important. So,
Nice.
yeah.
All right, let me ask you this, and if you have different answers, that's okay. I don't normally ask this one, but you guys are an interesting couple, so I want to hear what you have to say about this. Who, if you could put a fine point on it, who is your most interesting guest you've had so far?
Who's your favorite child?
Right. And I'm going to give you the chicken out.
Interesting. I'll tell you, we had a very memorable guest that we really enjoyed. And we actually had her back a second time because of something that transpired
Yes.
between the first time we had her on the second time, and that is Artemisia Devine. Now, she is a former madam and sex worker from Australia, and she used all her experience and she developed a method of of interpreting, let me see if I'm getting this right, your erotic fantasies, how to work that into your couple play.
Hmm.
And
She was a dominatrix herself, actually. That was what she did when she was in the sex industry.
Hmm.
And indeed, yeah,
yeah,
she
so she
developed,
has
yeah.
this method. She called it the divinery method, and you could take classes in it, you can get trained in it. And she found somebody, I think some Russian woman, who like totally ripped her off and
So
was,
let me just throw in. So
yes,
we interviewed her about her method. That was the first interview we
yeah,
did. And then it was relatively short time
yeah,
after that.
yeah, soon
And it
after.
happened, yeah, I think it's because we had interviewed her, so I was getting her newsletter or something, or I heard her podcast, and she talked about what you're getting
Right,
into.
she said people had ripped her off in the past, and this woman was selling basically her stuff, Artemisia's stuff, as her own. And Artemisia contacted her and confronted her and went through this whole process with her of wanting her to understand why it was so hurtful to her, not just, personally, but financially, and what she did was so wrong. And this woman heard her, and they heard Heard, not with a T,
Hmm.
heard her and basically apologized and really processed the whole thing. And the two of them were able to come to, I don't want to say an agreement. They were able
Oh,
to
yeah.
talk about it. And then I guess then they did a podcast together. So it was around the time Bruce's book on betrayal and forgiveness
Hmm.
was coming out. So we said, wow, we got to get her back on to talk about this. And we did. And
Wow.
that was like a wow
Yeah.
moment for
Yeah,
us.
because the woman who had done the plagiarizing rose to the occasion. She actually heard, and you mentioned sort of in passing that she was Russia. I mean, she lives in this country now, but she grew up in Russia, and that was part of her story. She said that, and she wasn't using it as an excuse, but she was saying where she grew up, no one would blink an eye if you did something like that. You just did that because if there was something there, you could take it.
Hmm.
And there wasn't this ethic that would say, that's wrong to steal someone else's work. And again, she wasn't using that as an excuse. She was sort of using that introspectively, just realizing, I think that's how I was letting myself do this. But they did this very moving podcast with each other. And yeah, as Judy said, we wanted to have them on after that. And so we had her back. I had Artemisia back on again and just talking about that experience of a betrayal. It is a kind of a betrayal
Yeah,
and
sure.
how it was so inspiring. See, this is very similar to the Woke Wilkinson thing. I think you do too. I get very inspired by these people who are finding ways to cross a breach that seems unbridgeable.
Yeah,
That's so much of
no
couples
kidding.
therapy is about that.
Yeah, because Artemisia could have just said, I'm going to sue you. You're a horrible person.
Right.
And like just blacklisted this other woman, but she didn't. She took the time to listen to her and explain to her what it meant to her personally of what this other woman did. And they were able to, come to some type of understanding about it. So
Wow.
as I said, that's what Bruce's book was talking about, how people can get past a betrayal and how do you forgive somebody and how do you move on. So that's what I found very inspiring. So that would be my choice. How about you?
Oh, well, gee. I mean, well, now that you've said that, I don't know how to top that one. But no,
Follow
that
that
one.
one up. There you
I
go.
agree, honey.
Well, okay, so I'll tell you another one that was memorable. Susan Bratton.
Oh, Susan Bratton.
She was memorable. So
I think she's probably the inspiration for my book
yeah,
record.
I think you wrote the book, I think, not long after she, yeah. She's a sex, well, she's not a sex therapist. It was interesting. So yeah, I have a little story around that, I guess. So Susan Bratton is she's really she's not a therapist at all. I guess what she says, she's a coach, she's an educator. She calls herself a sex educator. She's incredibly good. And I say this with love, and I don't mean this as a cut down.
Yeah.
She's really good at self-promotion.
And she's got a dynamic
Yeah.
personality. She's just so much fun. And
And
this,
Okay.
she speaks in extremes. She was a lot of fun. And so I'll give you the little anecdote I sometimes tell about her. Anyway, we just had a blast with her. She was a lot of fun. And so we had her on. And not too long after that, we had on another person. Actually, it was Batsheva, I think
mm,
we had on. Or maybe it
no, we
wasn't.
had Batchev on
We had
before
Batsheva
her.
on
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Someone else, another sex therapist. We had another person who was a therapist on. I think a sex therapist, a different person. And we like to ask, often we'll ask like listener questions. Because people have sent us questions and we'll sometimes ask that, when it's in somebody's bailiwick. So we had asked Susan a question that someone was having a problem in the general domain of sex. And Susan said, "Ah, that's easy, no problem. Let me tell you how to answer it." And she proceeded to give, her answer on how to solve this problem. And after that, and again, we loved having Susan. She was great. But I did comment, as you may remember, after we finished the interview, I commented to Judy, I said, I would never tell someone asking me a question, "Oh, that's a piece of cake. That's easy." Because there's kind of an implication there that, oh, you're too dumb to figure out this obvious thing, If they're asking me the question, it's because it's not easy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking it. There must be, if I think it's easy, then I'm missing something, because the
Sure.
people asking these questions aren't stupid. They just aren't. They may not know as much as I do about some things, and they know more about some things that you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I would never say it. I just commented on that in passing. So several weeks later, we had on someone else who was a therapist. And just for the hell of it, we said, let's use that same question. And so we asked her that question. And she said, "Wow, I can see why that's really difficult. That's really hard." And then she gave some suggestions, which were virtually identical to the suggestions that Susan gave. And I just love that contrast. And nothing wrong with Susan and nothing wrong with that other person, but I just love that contrast, and it sort of bore out what I was saying. It's like, yeah, when you're working with people in a therapeutic context, I never want to imply even that they're stupid because they're not. If I'm so glib as to think they are, that's on me. That's no, that I'm missing something. But anyway, so we had fun with
Wow. All right. Again, you never know what kind of answer you're going to get when you ask this stuff.
that.
So, I mean, I'm starting to see a theme here, though, which really does explain why Bruce is in such a good mood every time I talk to him, I think. Going to
Yeah.
leave it there. We're going to
Yeah,
move forward.
I think that's accurate. Yes.
Now, Bruce, I didn't get back to you when we started talking about books. You have written 3 books, right?
I have.
You
Yep.
want to tell everybody about those, real quick, just kind of
Absolutely.
what they're
We
about?
just happen to have them sitting
Well,
around
well,
here.
There
I
you
like to
go.
call this the book that started the podcast. This is the one that came out February 29th, 2020.
Gotcha.
Um, Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And that's the one that's oriented around, those 7 words. I can talk about those briefly. Be
Mhm.
kind, don't panic, and have faith. 3 sort of principles. They sound very simple. I mean them pretty simple, but I realized that this kind of the origin story of
Just
that.
happened to be taking a
Just
sip.
having
It
to
has
take a sip.
nothing to do with my
She's
shameless
showing all their
self-promotion of the
swag.
book or merch.
If
Just
you're on the
saying.
audio
Just
version,
saying.
Judy's over here lifting their merch up. Okay,
Yes, it
which we're going
just
to talk about
happens
in
to
a
be
minute.
showing it as we go.
The showmanship here is killing me, folks. It's
Oh yeah.
absolutely killing me. But I love it. All
And
right.
by the way, I designed that lovely logo for
Yes.
I
couples
mean,
therapy in 7 words.
Yes, Judy designed
Thank
that
you,
one.
Canva.
Yes.
this is capitalism
Yeah,
at its
that's
best
another one,
right
by
now.
the way. Canva, yeah. Put in a plug for Canva.
All right.
So anyway, the 7 words, those 3 principles, be kind in the sense of kinship, and don't panic so you can be kind, and have faith so that you don't panic. And I don't mean necessarily religious faith. Anyway, I wrote all about those various principles, and that book was arranged around that. So it's got sections on be kind and don't panic, have faith, and then a section on, all right, how do you apply this? Now go and learn, so how do you apply this? So that's what that book was. And then a couple years later came out with
It's not about communication. Why everything you know about couples therapy is wrong.
I had fun with that title. Um, the because it's a snarky title, but really that's the one what we were talking about earlier, like why I was so impressed with people like Will Wilkinson or people like Artemisia.
Right.
That's the one where I talk a lot about, if you think that's why I say well, everything you know about couples therapy is wrong, and it applies to me too. I point that out in the book. Everything I know about couples therapy is wrong. It's not that I don't have good ideas. I wouldn't be writing books if I didn't think I had good ideas. It's that they're ideas, but I don't claim that I know them, that I have perfect knowledge of them, because there are other ideas that often are expressing quite opposite views that also have merit. And so it's to know too much is what gets a lot of couples in trouble. They just think they have the other person pegged and it's not good. And if it's another one. We just did what we're calling short takes. We just started doing those, by the way, in terms of podcasts.
Mhm.
We'll see how they go. We just started doing the under 10 minutes. The first one we put out there was just what, six,
Five,
seven, 8 minutes,
six.
whatever. And I did a short take on what's called hardening of the categories. And the dread disease of hardening of the categories. And that book really was talking about that. And then the most recent book that Judy already mentioned.
Betrayal and forgiveness. How to navigate the turmoil and learn to trust again.
And it's funny. I've noted uh, in the Amazon statistics on what's getting people to that book. I would have initially it was a lot about betrayal trauma, but now more recently it's about how to trust again. It's the
Mhm.
piece about how to develop trust that seems to be grabbing people and getting
Hmm.
them to order the book.
Interesting. All right. I feel like I'm on the Price is right now. I mean, because you're over here talking about it, she's over here holding the book, doing a little this here. Folks, if you're watching the video version, you're getting the whole act. This is really these two. If you haven't rehearsed this, then this is all just natural,
Comes
and
natural.
Exactly.
I'm incredibly impressed. So
Mm.
that's great. All right. Well, I appreciate you telling everybody about your books. That's awesome. And obviously, it kind of gave rise to the podcast that you guys are doing. Now, the podcast has been around for a little while. You've hit all of your milestones, really. The 20 to 50, the 100. You're in that very elite percentage of established podcasts at this point, which is great for you. So, congratulations. Um, did you experience any difficulties in terms of, putting the podcast together or coming up with content, any sort of thing in getting to where you are today with the
Mhm.
podcast?
Yeah, I can address the some of the technical issues, or some of the
Sure.
sort of
Whatever comes
logistical
to your
points
mind.
that have
Yeah.
happened. Well, in terms of content, I don't think we've ever had trouble coming up with content.
Right. If we don't have guests, we'll find a topic that seems to be going around. Like sometimes I'll read the what is it
The
the
modern love section of
Modern
the
Love
yeah,
section. Well,
New York
more
Times.
like the Q&A and the ethics
Oh yeah,
questions,
yeah.
or I'll go online and I'll see what some of the topics are that are trending, or I'll ask Bruce. I said, what are your clients coming to you with this week? What seems to be the overwhelming, problem? So if we don't have a guest, that's what we'll talk about.
Yeah.
We'll talk
So
about.
that, and we've had fun doing some other stuff. We did a short series where we were interviewing biblical characters. That was fun. That was before you wrote your book. But well, where of course we played the characters and changed voices and talk about technical, that got to be technically kind of ridiculous. Let me address some of the technical stuff that's come up. There was a period of time, there's always the great question I think podcasters have to address. Should you do just video or should you do video and audio?
Sure.
So here we are doing video and audio, and we have indeed been doing video and audio for a while. We started off doing just audio, and then some people are saying, "Oh, you should do video." So we added video to it, and
No, it
non-expert.
wasn't even adding video. We became video.
Well,
Oh,
that's what I mean.
yeah, yeah.
We became yes.
Yes,
Well,
we
good point.
became video.
We use Podbean is our host.
Sure.
They're good, And then I said, oh, to do video with them, you gotta, upgrade. So I upgraded with Podbean and we started doing video. And I didn't realize it was months, maybe it was a year. I don't know. It was quite a long time. I happened to glance at, I think it was Spotify at the time. Spotify wasn't doing video. So they only had our audio only ones. And I looked and said, oh my goodness. All of a sudden, I realized there's all these episodes we've been doing that
And some
some of
friends
the,
of ours and Seth too, his son said to us, I download them and the video takes up too much space.
yeah. So
So
then we
they stopped
realized.
listening to it
Yeah.
because it was too much space.
So what
Right.
we ended up with, and I've noted in being interviewed on other people's podcasts, this seems to be a popular choice. We ended up saying, all right, we'll do them in video, but we'll just put the video on YouTube. And I also always do a blog post about it so that that's where I send people to, and that goes to YouTube. And then we'll post the audio only on Podbean, and that goes to all the podcast platforms. So that's basically what we've been doing. It was sort of, I suppose I could be embarrassed, but I won't bother being, how long it took me to figure out that that's what was going on. What do I know?
Gotcha.
What do we know?
It's just us. I'm kind of the techie of the two of us.
Right.
And so I use Audacity well, actually, I use Audacity to create the audio only version, but we use Zoom as you are using Zoom here. We use
Right.
Zoom for guests. When we're not using Zoom, just use the camera app on Windows to record, when it's just the two of us. And then I just use Audacity to extract the video, and that's what I put on Podbean.
We bought decent mics, good
Yeah,
mics.
yeah, and
So
not
Cool.
super, super expensive. What are we using? Audio Technica. I don't remember how much they were a few years ago, but they're not super expensive. And just a web camera. We didn't invest a whole lot in equipment.
Good. That's that whole low barrier to entry thing
Yeah,
all
Mhm.
over
yeah.
again, but that's great.
Mhm.
All right, let's get into a little more of the podcaster, type of questioning. The what do you guys do to promote your podcast?
Mm. Mm. Not our strong suit. Well,
Starting to
okay, so
worry.
I'll tell you what I do. Yeah, so every time we do a podcast, it goes out on Podbean, goes to all the podcast platforms. I always do social media posts on Facebook. Of late, I've started clipping using Opus Clip.
Hmm.
I'll clip the video, put those out, zillions of those out on social media. Opus Clip makes that relatively easy to do. So we've been doing that for a while. How long have we been
That
doing
goes
that?
on Instagram and TikTok. Is it on
Not on
TikTok?
TikTok
No.
anymore.
Okay.
No, no, that's too hard to do now through Opus Clip. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, I gave up on that one. But yeah, mostly, and it's where all the views are. It was interesting. Just the other day, I think it was just yesterday, I looked at the statistics and realized the Facebook posts are going nowhere. So Instagram posts are getting a lot of views of the clips. So I just started yesterday when I was posting a bunch, out several weeks, putting it on Instagram, LinkedIn. At YouTube Shorts, we get lots of views on YouTube Shorts. And where else? I think that pretty much covers it. And as I said, we do social media posts, just announcing when we have a new thing. That's pretty much what we do for that.
Okay.
I'd love to hear some other ideas too. And we get ourselves interviewed. Well, this is the first time we've been interviewed by a podcast, because yours is one of the few, I think, actual
Yeah.
podcaster podcast. Well, yours is the podcaster nation. So
Yeah, I think actually we're the only one that's out there really that's doing anything.
yeah,
That's one
Wow.
of the reasons why I created this in the first place was because there was no forum for
Mhm.
podcasters.
Podbean has one, I think, but not like this.
Right.
Podbean has one, and they're probably mostly promoting Podbean, actually.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Buzzsprout has one too, where they kind of
Uh,
promote themselves and then bring people in. But this is the only one that's out there that's about you folks. That's
yeah,
about the podcaster, that's the
Mhm.
guest. So the whole idea is to take people who are in this chair and put them in that chair,
yeah.
and let
Yeah.
them, talk personally. Now do you guys promote your products and stuff like that on your show?
We
We
used
used
to.
to. We kind of stopped. We promote the books, but not the merch.
Yeah, for a while we were promoting the merch. Let's just be transparent. Nobody's buying the merch, but hey, buy the merch. It's nice. I mean, we're not making money from the merch. You know how, well, this is another tip for folks if they want to make merch. You know how easy it is to make merch these days. It's incredible. There's no upfront cost. I'm spacing out on the name of the company. Do you know it offhand? I don't
There's a
remember.
Shopify type of store that you can do. That's
It's
true.
Something
that
like
Right.
that.
to make the store. Yeah, I use WooCommerce, WooCommerce to make the store on our website.
Sure.
But to do the product, I'm spacing out on the name of the company that made it very easy. You can design these products online,
Mhm.
zero upfront cost. We bought them ourselves. You can buy the you can buy the cheap version for yourself, the discounted version if you're the
Right.
one who's created it, because we don't get a cut of our own
Right.
sale. But it's incredibly easy to do that. So it was easy to make merch. And one of our listeners suggested it. I forgot, one of our friends. I forgot who suggested it. Somebody said, you guys should have merch. Oh, it was Karen.
Oh.
Yes, a friend of ours. Yes, who's a photographer. Karen Pike. I'll put in a plug for her. Great photographer.
Wonderful
I think she's the one who said, you guys should have merch.
I
Or
think
maybe
you're
her
right.
wife. It might have been Gillian. One of them said, you guys should have merch. So we made merch. So that's how see, now I got to hold up. We've got the t-shirt.
T-shirt. We got
I don't think
the
anybody
we
bought
got,
Nice.
the
got
t-shirt. A couple of
the
people have bought
tote
the cup.
bag. It's a great tote
Nice.
bag. Look at
T-shirt,
that.
tote bag. We use the
Nice.
tote bags all the time. They're
All
great.
the time. That's why they look so cruddy.
Yes, that one is a well-used tote bag because it's been totally around a lot.
Well, I love the merch. I love that you're out there doing that. So, now, other than the merch, have you monetized the podcast in any way? I think you have some advertising, right, on your podcast,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And this is again, this speaks of my relative ignorance, which is boundless, it seems. Which is I didn't know. I knew some time ago, God knows how long, a couple of years ago, I must have clicked some box on Podbean saying, sure, go ahead and put on ads, thinking, well, they're not going to really do that because we don't get that many, downloads. Come to discover, I think the way I discovered they'd been doing it is they sent me some money. Not a lot of money. We're not talking about a lot of money here. It's like, oh, good, I can get a cup of coffee. But they sent some money, and I said, oh, they've been doing ads. And then, yeah, I talked to my son, who's one of our loyal listeners, and he said, you didn't know that there are ads on there?
It's
I
like,
literally,
we don't listen to it.
I don't listen to it on Podbean. So apparently there are ads, beginning, middle, and end. And, I'm going to start being more careful than I was. You can specify where to put them in the middle.
Hmm.
Beginning and end is fine. You can specify where to put them in the middle. And my son was saying, yeah, they're not real graceful about that. They don't put it in mid-sentence. The AI is clever enough to figure out when you're not in mid-sentence, but
Yeah, sort of.
it's often
Sometimes they do.
in mid-paragraph, or in mid-concept.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you probably experienced this.
We have had a
Oh,
sex
yes,
toy
that's
company.
right.
Um,
Yeah, they were the only one they paid us
they,
$100 to put an ad on once. And what I said was it was a Chinese sex toy company.
mhm.
And they said, would you like to do this? And I said, we'll only do it for a product that we actually endorse, so send us the product. And they did, and we endorsed it. So actually, I think you did the endorsing.
I did the endorsing. Hey, I got a book out of it.
All righty. I mean, a sponsor's a
I'm not
sponsor.
going to advertise something I don't believe in.
I don't blame you at all.
And it was really kind of cool. So we got the product, for free, and then also they sent us 100
They
bucks,
paid us,
and
and
they
we wrote
paid
a
us, and
commercial.
it's still on our website is the discount code
Hmm.
for that because they offered a discount code for that product, and it's still sitting on the website. This is like now a couple of years ago at
More
least,
than that.
2 or
I
3
think
years
that's
ago.
like our first or second
Yeah.
year.
So
Yeah.
you're still advertising them even after they stopped paying
Oh
you.
no,
No,
we're
no,
not.
no.
No, it was on one episode. They paid for an ad on one episode, but they gave a discount code. So anybody listening to that episode can still find the discount code. I don't know if it would be honored. I assume it would be.
But
Or
they're on your website still.
they're on the website. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
because
still
all
you're
the
still
episodes are on
advertising.
the website.
Right,
What's
but
that?
this company is on your website or just
There's
in
no
that
ad for
episode?
them.
I
All I
see.
have on the website is I don't even think I mentioned the name of the company. For people, if you listen to the episode where we offer a discount code, episode number,
Ah,
whatever it was, discount code, here's the code.
got it.
So
Okay.
that's just so that they would have it there because we said in the episode, go to our website, you'll find the discount code. Or I think we said the discount code in the episode. We must have. So anyway, but I doubt if anybody actually bought them or they haven't repeated that. Let's put it that way.
I
They
see.
haven't said, we want to come back. I'm impressed, on the episode, on the podcast where you interviewed me and you've got that sponsor and we love a sponsor. If it's something, it would have to be obviously something we believe in.
Sure,
But
for sure.
you make that coffee look really good.
My coffee sponsor and I have been together a long time, so
Yeah.
we've been through a lot. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it's on one hand it's not that easy to find a good sponsor. On the other hand, it's not difficult to find sponsors if you're looking
Mm.
and if you're
Mhm.
putting out good content and stuff. So, but that's cool. I like the story. I mean, it fits. It works for you. All right, so you've had a sponsor, you've got ads in the thing, you're doing merch. Any other monetization? Because I mean, every time I ask the question, we come up with a new thing.
Now the one, and we've talked about this all along, the one sort of indirect monetization is that lots of people buy my books because they've heard me on the podcast.
There we go.
So
All right.
it
And
does
you've
sell
gotten
books.
clients too.
And I've got asked, and I've gotten clients for my practice, which in terms of, amounts of money involved is way more lucrative than, than buying
Absolutely.
books.
That is
So
huge.
yeah, that it definitely contributes to it. And yeah, but it's a good part of it's I still wouldn't say it's why we do it though.
No, it's not why we do
When people ask why do you do it, I
it.
mean my answer is because it's fun. We do it because it's
We
fun.
enjoy doing it. It's a, nice time. We come together every week. We chit chat. We meet interesting people. It's been great.
So
We,
this is a fun thing for you to do as a couple.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I
Yeah.
love that. That's so great. I talk about the therapeutic aspects of doing a podcast yourself, all the time. I don't think I've ever actually had the opportunity to demonstrate to people the therapeutic aspect of a couple doing a podcast together, like you guys are doing right
Mm.
now. That is
Yeah, I
so
mean,
cool.
if we needed therapy, it wouldn't be so good. So it's not like, oh, this will save your marriage, do a podcast together. I think more likely people try, I mean, I know lots of couples, well, of course, through my practice especially, but I bet we, jointly know lots of couples where they probably shouldn't try something like this.
And I've listened to a lot of podcasts that are couples where they talk to each other and they talk about their lives and their problems, and it's like 10 minutes in, it's like I can't listen to this anymore. 40 minutes in, it's like, yeah, I don't really want to know that much about people. And I know that there are people out there that like that because there are so many reality shows. I can't sit down and watch all these reality shows because number one, I'm really not that interested in other people's lives. Sometimes it might have a little bit of an entertainment thing, but we're not big sharers of our personal lives on this
We
podcast.
we did one. Yeah, we did one about our personals, our story of how we got together. We did
Yeah,
do that one.
we've done that, but we're not like it doesn't come up every week. Any problem? Well, we don't see that. Yeah, it would be a very boring podcast if we talked about our problems. But I hear people talk their kids and their sex lives and their friends. It's like, I don't want to know about this.
It's interesting. I differ a little in that because of the work I do. I'm in it
Yeah,
because I love talking with people about that. But
yeah,
in a like a reality show or a podcast setting, which would be essentially the same idea as a reality show, um, it's not the same thing as talking to people in a confidential setting.
right.
Hmm.
That always drives me nuts when I see these reality shows with therapy. It's
Right.
like, you're leaving out the fact that this is on camera and you all know it. It's like that is not the same thing as doing therapy with people where they're not on camera and they know it's confidential. It's a very different sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah, so I'm probably an exception because, like, everybody loves watching the Real Housewives and Kardashians. And it's like I have no stomach for that kind of stuff. So,
Nice.
so I'm the wrong audience.
I love this.
So we don't overshare, but I think we give people a sense of who we are.
yeah, and you noted that, and we have heard lots of feedback over the years we've been doing this, that our chemistry is what is a lot about what this podcast is about,
Yeah.
even though that's not what we're talking about, but we're demonstrating it. So the fact that that what people see is two people sitting here who clearly enjoy each other. I think that's a
Hmm.
fair statement,
Hmm.
and that's inspiring. I hope it's inspiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was listening to it, that's exactly what I got from it. Yeah, it's very light. Even if the subject matter is kind of heavy, you folks are not heavy.
Mm.
With the way you come out with your delivery and with especially with your interaction. So you can tell that you're having fun and you can tell that you're enjoying, each other's company when you're on the show.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
sort of thing can't be bought. It can't be planned. It just
Yeah.
is or it's not.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and with you folks, it is. It's authentic. So I mean, I'm glad to hear that that's a plus for you, and that's something that helps you out. But it comes across very well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
all right, let me, in the interest of time, let me go ahead and hit you with my corny question, and you guys can give me separate answers. Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
All right. As you do your podcast and put it out and so on, what is the thing about podcasting that you love the most? And what is the thing about podcasting that you just hate the most?
Go for it.
Oh, you're gonna make me go first again.
Bruce is already laughing. I'm worried.
Let's see. I think what I love the most is just meeting such a wide range of people and hearing what's out there. You know, things I never would have imagined in my life. Um, so I think that's what I enjoy the most is just meeting so many different people. What I don't like, I really don't think there's anything about it I don't like. I mean, you might say the technical stuff, but I'm not involved with that. So yeah, the only thing that yeah, there's nothing about it that I don't like.
Hmm.
That's
So
great. All right.
sorry.
Yeah.
That's no, that's great.
Well, and I agree, of course, I love the meeting folks, the just engaging folks, and engaging with ideas. Very simple, what you're saying, stuff I wouldn't have thought. One of the shticks that I talk about a lot is the notion of what intimacy is. And the fact that when you're having an intimate conversation, and all I mean by intimate is you're present, you're honest with yourself and each other. When
Sure.
you're having an intimate conversation, stuff emerges that wouldn't have emerged for any of the people involved in it without that. It's like you form a joint mind. I love that. It feels great. To me, the thing I can, besides sex, the thing I can compare that to is playing music. That, to play music with someone is incredibly intimate when it works. And it can be amazing, that sense of joining and creating something that none of the, more than the sum of its parts. So I love that part. I also love doing it with you,
Hmm.
because it feels great. Just we
Yeah,
just
but
have fun doing it.
we talked about that,
Yeah,
so
we talked about that.
I
Yeah.
didn't want to repeat.
Yeah. And the thing the what is yeah, sometimes the technical stuff can be kind of annoying. Although I've kind of got it down now. I can edit really quickly. I've got some templates. I use Power Director, I think, to edit the video. I'll bet there's better tools out there, but that's the one I've been using for a while, so I'm used to it. So that's doable. Sometimes the pressure of feeling like, oh, we should be doing more to promote it, or that kind of stuff. It's the same thing for writing my books. Why did I write books? I think I got good stuff to say, and it's fun. I love it. I just enjoy it. The promoting thing, I feel the urge to do it. It's like I should do that, but it's a pain in the ass. You know, so that's the part that's sort of a pain in the ass, even though I think it's important, to get these ideas
Sure.
out. It's good, but that part's a pain in the ass.
Nice. Okay. This is the benefit of teamwork too, because top answer on the board for things people hate goes back and forth between editing and promoting. So
There you
definitely
go.
there. And Judy, since you don't have to do any editing, you kind of like the top two answers were off of your plate. So you're like, hey, there's really nothing I don't like about it.
Right.
That's
So
awesome though.
I like the part of meeting people. And I think it's a privilege to be able to hear people's stories. And and some of them have very personal and hard to tell stories.
Yeah,
And I always feel grateful that people are willing to share that with us and that we get to maybe help in some way. And
I
so
agree. I agree.
that's
It's
satisfying.
special. Yeah, it's special when people open up
Gratifying.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So as we kind of wrap things up here, the last question I usually like to ask folks, and again, you feel free to give me separate answers, but um, as you come along, I mean, you've been doing this for 5 years. You have over 200 episodes. You guys have been here a minute. You've encountered a lot of things along the way. So what is your best piece of advice as podcasters to the podcasters who are not quite where you are yet?
Wow, what would you say?
Um, be yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not. Uh, know who your audience is. Go for that audience. And even if it's two people, it's two people, but you don't want to be you can't be something you aren't. Is what I think, like you said, people relate to us because we're authentic, we get along with each other, we have good chemistry, and we're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Some people want, the more of the Kardashian thing, the more of the sensational stuff, the more of the personal stuff, and there are hundreds of podcasts out there for that, but we can't be that. We can only be who we are. So if you're starting a podcast, you got to be who you are and know what you want to
Mm,
communicate. So
yeah.
that would be my advice.
Well, yeah,
Nice.
and what I agree with that, of course, and what I would add to that is um, do it because it's fun. In other words, if it isn't fun, you might want to consider trying something else. You know?
And I also want to say, I'm the Ed McMahon to his Johnny Carson. I mean, we're doing this podcast. We're not doing it because of me. We're doing it because he's a couples therapist. And he likes to say, and I'm the real person. So so I'm there to be the support. I'm here to be the sidekick. I'm not here to be the star of it
Yeah,
because this really isn't, my expertise and my background. That's not where I'm coming from. But I think I'm here to, lend you
yeah,
the support
and
that you need and to be the other person to bounce off ideas with.
yeah, and that yeah, that's yeah, I was going to mention that. That's a really important point in terms of doing it with someone. That can be a tricky kind of dynamic if you're not both okay with it. Because there's this sense which, what I had to deal with, and still sometimes I worry about, gee, it feels, I want it to be equal,
Hmm.
but in that respect, it
It's
isn't.
not
It's
equal.
not, and
And
we both know
in the
that.
episodes, like when he's talking to therapists, and it's like, I'm fine to sit back because, I know what my role is in this, and I'm not a therapist, so I'm not gonna, I'll chime in and I'll ask the questions that I think real people want to ask because sometimes they'll go off on their little therapist tangent,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know,
Right.
Yeah, when we nerd out but that's why I say you're the real person, And there's that little element of our respective personalities. I am, as I often point out, I'm a recovering nerd with frequent relapses. And Judy is not a nerd. Judy is like one of those incredibly like normal people. So
normal,
normal,
well-adjusted.
well-adjusted. What can I say? So, where are you seeing me? But that,
Hmm.
but yeah, but many of her friends are weird. So that I feel kind of good about that. It's like, well, she obviously has a taste for us weirdos.
Yeah, I'm sure you've watched the old Mary Tyler Moore show.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so
Oh yeah.
Mary was always surrounded by like these nutty, kooky characters.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like the Mary in my life. I've got so many kooky, crazy character friends and
Because
family
you're
members.
really good at
So,
loving them. You're really good at loving people who are kind of weird, which is why we get along. So it works out well. So anyway, the point being
Okay.
that we don't have the same role in it, and it's a piece of advice for podcasters. If you can do it with a partner, or even when you're with a guest, be comfortable in who you are. I had to learn that as a therapist. Be comfortable in accepting your expertise and knowing what the limits of it are. But again, I'll go back to what I was saying a moment ago, and do it if it's fun. If it's fun, it'll come through. And again, fun doesn't always have to be jolly fun, but if it feels meaningful to you,
Yeah.
do it. If it doesn't, then as I
why do
say,
it?
why do it? And I've heard podcasts occasionally where that question occurs to me. It's like, why are you doing this? So, if you can feel like, I don't care if you have two listeners or 2,000 listeners. If it's fun, then go ahead and do it.
Nice. Nice. I mean, we were dating ourselves just a little bit with the Johnny Carson, Ed McMahon thing,
Mhm.
but when you pulled out Mary Tyler Moore, they all know that we're old now.
That's
Just,
right.
just a thought.
I mean,
Okay, boomer.
anybody who had a question, yes, we're all older people. That's correct.
We
We we
are.
we remember
Past a
Mary
certain
Tyler Moore.
age. Yes, we are. Well, Bruce and I are baby boomers. I don't know about you, but
We're
I'm
boomers.
we're
I'm I'm just
boomers.
I'm just me. I'm Italian. We don't age. It just doesn't happen.
Ah,
Oh, there you
there you
go.
And
go.
That's
so
why I can't tell your age. You are
no,
so
we're like a
aged.
fine wine over here. So
Mhm.
no, I love it. You folks have been absolutely wonderful, and it's been great seeing this other side of Bruce. To be honest,
Mm.
since he was
Oh,
on my
thank
other
you.
podcast, and I mean, Bruce, you were a very friendly guy over there, but this is a little different side of you right now when
Mhm.
Judy gets involved. Your
And
dynamic is
and that's
awesome.
why I do the podcast with him because you saw I mean, he's great alone,
Uh-huh.
but it brings out a different dynamic. So,
Yeah, he's more playful when he's with you.
Yeah,
That's for
mhm.
sure.
absolutely.
That is for sure.
Absolutely.
Different tone of the podcast though too. So I got to
Mhm.
give you a little bit of a break. But I love your dynamic, and I
Thank you.
think it's pretty clear why your podcast is as successful as it is, and why you've been doing it for over 200 episodes. I applaud you both for going out and just having fun because that's what
Well, thank you.
podcasting ought to be in the first place.
Mhm.
Thank
So
you.
that's fantastic. Listen, the hosts, co-hosts of Couples Therapy in 7 Words, living by the motto, be kind, don't panic, and have faith. The 7 words to live by. Dr. Bruce Chalmer and Judy Alexander. Folks, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and just sharing and letting everybody know who you are and what you're about.
It was our pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Folks, this is another awesome episode of The Podcaster Nation. This is the place that is about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. This is the place, folks, where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.